as the instrument gets more difficult, you will face more challenges. But rather than feeling frustrated, try and pinpoint what one small thing can I achieve during my practice to make it more effective. So very deliberate practice where you notice a difference by the end of 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So you're not just playing through the motions, which is so easy to do. Do that dedicated, deliberate practice, and then throw it out the window and have some fun doing something else. Plug your harp into a looper pedal, just experiment and have fun.
That was harpist Eilidh McCry. Hello and welcome to episode 92 of the Irish Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Becker. Eilidh will be my guest on the show today. This is another chance for us to hear from somebody who's trying to preserve aspects of Irish and Celtic culture and share that culture with future generations. Yes, we talk about baseball on the podcast, but Irish history, the Irish language, and other aspects of Irish culture are also important to discuss. I've been hosting this podcast for roughly 3.5 years, so make sure you're checking out old episodes at irishbaseball.org. Let's get today's conversation started with Eilidh McCry. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You play the harp and you teach the harp, and I just want to get a little bit into this because I am fascinated by people who are taking the Irish traditions and trying to not only preserve them now, but pass them forward to the next generation, because I think that is so important, especially among Irish Americans, because we are trying to keep this culture alive in an ever Americanized world. So why don't you talk a little bit first about your experience with the harp, but then how you are helping the next generation find an interest in this instrument?
Absolutely. Well, I think everything that you said about traditions and passing it forward is something which is so close to my heart. I'm actually the daughter of an Australian piper who moved from Australia to Scotland, but they heard the harp at a wedding and thought that would be a lovely instrument for their oldest daughter to play. But I was so fortunate growing up that my dad, who had a love of and still does have an absolute passion for traditional music, was able to help me with my practice and seek out inspiring teachers, source an instrument, and all these things. I grew up in Scotland, but all these things, whether it be Scotland or Ireland or America, are just massive considerations. Where do you find a teacher? Where do you find an instrument? Is this instrument really expensive? It's not part of our school curriculum. How do we make it accessible? And with traditional music, there's so many subtleties in the music where you can only learn that by experiencing it, trying to dance, listening to music, playing with other musicians. So I was really fortunate growing up that my parents found a great teacher, and I had to travel an hour weekly to go for a lesson. But it was an instrument that, as soon as it was seen as being more accessible within our community, just grew. It just flourished. My sister played, we started playing duets. Next thing, you've got a little ensemble going. And then you have a teacher coming to the town. So it was really exciting to see how wherever I started something, it naturally just flourished and cottoned on, and people were like, oh, this is beautiful. And then I would attend festivals and little competitions. And then I went to a boarding school down near Glasgow, which was 3.5 hours from my home, so that I could attend a Saturday music college for classical harp. But I was lucky that the school offered traditional music scholarships. So then I was the first traditional music scholar at Lomond School, which is a beautiful town, Helensburgh, on the River Clyde. And with that came opportunities to work with fiddle players. We all learned penny whistle, baran, and we even had tours to the US to play at the Caledonian Club in New York City and compete at Grandfather Mountain Highland Games in Atlanta. And every experience that I had was just meeting more and more musicians and having fun, which is the most important thing as a kid, of course, to have fun with other musicians. And we played at Lincoln Center for a foyer event for New York City Ballet. And so music was always just fun, collaborating with other musicians and learning from each other. And so then after school, I pursued more of a classical route, went to Trinity College of Music in London and the Royal Academy of Music in London. So studied for 6 years. But being in London was very vibrant and exciting, playing for jazz festivals, orchestras, TV work. I played with Andrea Bocelli, and I did a charity concert with Sir Paul McCartney. And then I even did, really random gigs like playing the harp for cable TV, reading the news, dressed up as an angel. So London was just an incredible experience. And I was fortunate I got residencies at luxury hotels to be able to support myself through college, and lots of weddings, of course. And then I jumped off to Asia. So really sort of diverting away from my traditional roots, but in terms of giving others the opportunity to try and explore this magical instrument, taking it to a country where there were no harpists. I worked for a princess of Thailand who created a harp center because her grandfather had played the harp at Cambridge University, and she had inherited his very broken old harp and decided, oh, I'm going to create a harp center and bring over people from the UK. And then I explored teaching in international schools. Again, harp was not being offered at any of the international schools. So I was in Thailand for 6 years and then went to Singapore. And again, there weren't very many harp teachers there. So really created a niche as a harp teacher. No two students are the same, just trying to nurture each student and what they wanted from their music lessons to each individual. And then 18 months ago, we moved to the US. So this is a great opportunity to get back to traditional music. And I'm trying to take away the stigma of only seeing the harp, in New York City or on a stage, and keep it closer within my own community, offering ensemble classes, private lessons, and even just volunteering at my kids' high school and middle school concerts, accompanying the choir or accompanying the orchestra, just to peel off the layers and say, hey, I'm here, this beautiful instrument is here, and let's get it going in this town. So it's exciting.
So you actually brought up a few questions in your answer, and I'd like to ask some of them back to you. How expensive is picking up the harp? Is it something that maybe an average middle class kid can learn how to play this instrument?
And it's a very relevant question because people see it and associate it with, sort of early 19th century luxury mansions. It was always a very high to-do instrument in the UK. But prior to that, it was something which troubadours would play, and carry around the country, taking it to communities. So the harp, the Celtic harp, is very affordable in terms of there's a very good secondhand market. If you're looking for a new instrument, it's probably about $4,000 US. But used harps, you can get, it depends on the quality, of course, but you can get very reasonably priced secondhand instruments, and they last, if they're well built, for a lifetime. They're very well made nowadays. And then I'm actually looking at an education bundle from Wales in the UK, which is about $1,800 for 10 little baby harps. And when I taught in Singapore, we bought some little Chinese harps. They weren't so accurate the way the levers worked. But in terms of the strings and the colors and being able to create an opportunity for lots of students, they were about $200 each. And then there's also very good rent to buy schemes through some of the main harp makers. Lion and Healy offer a rent to buy scheme and charge about $50 a month, which is the same as I was actually paying for my daughter's cello. So I think in terms of getting started, there's some very affordable options available. Then it starts to get a bit more expensive if the student later progresses onto the pedal harp, which is a much larger instrument. The mechanism is much more complicated, and student models start around 15,000 and extend, upwards, let's say, but some professionals have instruments of $60,000, $70,000. But again, fortunately, even the student models, there's a good secondhand market. And I'm still playing the same harp that I had when I was 17. And they last your whole lifetime. I actually was fortunate when I moved here. I found a harp at an estate sale, and it had no strings on it. And it just needed a little bit of tender loving care. Put the strings back on it, had it serviced by a technician, and then got it back into the market for young harpist. A young harpist bought it who was heading off to college, and she never would have bought that instrument new. So sometimes you just have to be a bit savvy about where you're looking for instruments as well.
And I know this is going to be a question that varies more from person to person, because obviously I think, you were born with a talent for it, I'm sure. But how difficult is it to pick up the harp? If you are used to playing other instruments, obviously every instrument has a different level of difficulty until you find the one that really works for you. And then I think it flows more freely. Practice becomes fun and not just practice. But if you're doing it in school, if you're doing it to try to learn it, like, you have to get past that first initial difficult stage before I think you really start to want to practice it. So how hard is it to get to that point for most people?
I think that you hit the nail on the head when you said, learning has to be fun. So even with my very young students, it might just be find the red strings. I'm not going to put the pressure on, play it with the perfect technique. Find me the black strings. Can you find a low sound? Can you find a high sound? And then we do a little bit of kind of improvisation and storytelling, and use happy sounds or spooky sounds. So trying to incorporate little bits of technique, understanding the fundamental elements of music, and making it fun and creative is so important for young students. During COVID, when I had to switch a lot of my lessons online, and I actually retrained as a music educator for elementary and early childhood, it changed my perspective of how I view my own instrument. So using singing with the harp, again, this would have been a very old tradition that people naturally did. I don't have a great voice, but I found myself singing with my instrument. And even if the student just played the red string, C, while we sung Rain, Rain, Go Away, which is the foundation of singing, so me, so me, while playing the red string over and over again, it gave students that feeling of being capable. Oh my goodness, I'm singing, I'm playing, both at the same time. So in young students, confidence and fun is so important. And then you just take baby steps, and everybody with every process of learning will plateau and feel a little bit bored. And then my job as a motivating teacher is to try and figure out, okay, what do we do next to keep them excited? Or how do I transition? Oh, are you interested in jazz? Let's learn how to play the blues, you know? And then basically, I think as the instrument gets more difficult, you will face more challenges. But rather than feeling frustrated, try and pinpoint what one small thing can I achieve during my practice to make it more effective. So very deliberate practice where you notice a difference by the end of 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So you're not just playing through the motions, which is so easy to do. Do that dedicated, deliberate practice, and then, you know, throw it out the window and have some fun doing something else. You know, plug your harp into a looper pedal, you know, just experiment and have fun. In terms of comparing the harp to other instruments, I would say it's a very, very logical instrument. It has red strings, which are C, and black strings, which are F. And then it presents itself the same way as the white notes of the piano. So each string is C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then you're back at a red string again for C. So the way it presents itself is like a piano, but positioned differently in front of you. And then to make the black notes on the piano, the sharps and the flats, you move levers up and down to tighten the string by one semitone. Or on the big concert harp, you push a pedal up and down. So it has 3 positions. The top is for flat, the middle is for natural, and the bottom is for sharp. This might sound a bit complicated when you haven't got a visual, but each string can have 3 different sounds. But it's very tangible. You know, I play at a concert and a kid says, "Can I?" And they just, you know, their fingers just want to touch the strings, and they can easily pick out songs, nursery rhymes that they know, or if they have any foundation of piano, they can just pick them out on the harp. I think it gets more complicated when we start talking about the harp technique, and that's where having a slightly older child, maybe 7 and 8, they can begin to have the patience to try and understand the intricacy of the technique, pluck and then relax, rather than picking the strings. So it depends on the age of the student, how successful they're going to be. But I would say the most important thing with being successful long-term on the harp is to have the patience to be able to learn the technique, because the technique is quite intricate.
That's where we'll leave things off in the first part of my conversation with Eilidh McCry. We'll have her back on a future episode of the show to share more about why she loves the harp and why she feels it's an instrument worth passing on to future generations. I'm your host, Rick Becker, and this has been episode 92 of the Irish Baseball Podcast.